Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Sock. Again, John Dave and myself. We're going to look back over Ireland's defeat to France last weekend, all the other Six Nations action, Leinster's victory over Glasgow, and look forward to our fixture against the Ospreys next weekend. So, boys, before we get to the Ireland game out of the way, very disappointing 35-27 defeat in Paris. Poor enough performance, I would say.
It was a sickener. What did they say? That it's the hope that kills you. It's the end of the first half. There was hope, and especially when England didn't put up a huge. I mean, like one try was all we needed to win by. Score one try and win 7-0, and we were laughing. So it was very frustrating. It was a bit like, well, it wasn't anything like 2007 really, but it was a similar kind of margin that we nearly won by, and it was just a total sickener because the worst thing was it was there for the taking. It really was. We could have had that, and we could have had that extra 2 million, 3 million quid. It's I'm sure the team are kicking themselves as well. But where did we lose it, Dave?
On the scoreboard. That's where we lose most matches.
Sadly, you're right.
Ironically enough, we equaled our record points haul in Paris.
Yeah.
Which we scored a conversion strike in the last minute.
Shows you how comforting and delusion or aiding delusion statistics out of context can be. Because if I said, "Oh, we were going to go over there and equal our record points haul," you'd be all, "Oh, that's great." And then but you actually watch the match and you see what happened, then it doesn't seem so. "Ooh, that's great." And look, France were the better team. That's where we lost the game. They had a plan. They had a better plan than we did, and they executed better than we did. That's just the way it goes. It's hard to know. I mean, you made a comment there, Jay, in our WhatsApp group, and it was a very good one about squad depth. And you were saying, like, we're never going to win anything with player X, Y, and Z as part of the thing. And you're thinking, no, and you're absolutely right. I mean, these are not guys who are going to win you championships or World Cups, whatever. But then you think, in the normal run of things, would they even be there?
No, but the normal run of things isn't. You know what I mean? Look what happened in 2015.
But lads, I just thought, well, when I saw the team selected, I thought, well, that bench for starters isn't strong enough to win this game. Unless we were winning with, by a considerable margin with 10 minutes, 15 minutes to go, that bench isn't, but it's not going to come on and change the course of a game. It's just not good enough. And so that's one point. But the fellas who were on the bench, and even some of the starters, like, are they kind of yesterday's men? Is Sexton now yesterday's man? Like, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, who's better? And I take that point. But is it now time to look at, whether it's Ben Healy from Munster or Harry Byrne or Billy Burns, and just say, you've got the next 3 seasons until the next World Cup to come through and be an established international quality player, rather than getting Sexton to hang on for another year. And if you look at, say, Fardy, for example, I'm not saying his form has fallen off a cliff, but he's certainly not getting selected by coaches that see him training week in, week out. And he's getting selected on the bench for away matches up in Glasgow. So I'm trying to say is that you get to a certain point as a kind of a tipping point in everyone's careers that they just aren't good enough as they were 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And for example, Sexton's decision, and then he justified his decision by saying it was brave. It was dumb going for the line with 2 minutes to go before halftime.
I want to take notice of that. Decisions are never good nor bad. Outcomes are. It's easy to say the decision was bad. If we scored the try, it was a great decision, but it's the same decision.
But
If he-
Dave,
sorry,
Dave,
if
sorry,
he
sorry, no,
decided
hold
to
on,
take-
hold on.
If he decided to take the point
No, Dave,
and he
hold on.
missed,
We'd already scored.
it's a
No, hold on,
bad
hold on,
decision.
hold on. Just hold on a second, Dave. Hold on. We scored the try. I think it was either yourself or John said we needed to score 7 points, win by 7 points.
Mhm.
The function of this game was to win it. We'd scored our try. The only way you win it is by getting points on the board. Get the bloody points on the board. Take your points when available. This wasn't about going for bonus points. This wasn't about going to try and win with panache and style. This was about winning the game, and we were 4 points behind. You run the risk of exactly what happened. Anyone who's ever played rugby will tell you it's a game of small little games all made up that make up one big game. It's psychological battles that are played out. We had a penalty, we went for the line out, we failed to convert it. That's a massive fill up. That's not like us not receiving 7 points. That's us not receiving 7 points, but in their head, that's another 7 points. And it's actually probably a minus 7 points in our head, because when you come to that one-on-one battle, we failed, we lost. And we went in 4 points down instead of just 1 point down, away from home, turning around saying, well, we weren't playing great, but we're only 1 point in this, and we scored in the last minute of that half.
Yeah, and that's
Like
all
psychologically,
about the outcome.
in the dressing room at half time would be looking down at the floor instead of looking up at the ceiling, because they'd be so confident going back into that
And if
dressing
they scored the
room.
try,
Massive turning point.
and if they scored the try,
They didn't score the try.
if
If
they
they'd scored the try, fair play,
Well,
Dave. Fair
yeah,
play if they'd scored the
that's
try.
my point. You
But
see,
my point
the
is,
decision
you
isn't
don't-
that. What we're talking
There's
about
no
is the
point.
outcome.
There's no need to take the risk. Why take the risk? Get the points.
Why
Get
do
the
Lens?
points.
Why have we? Why
Tries
have
will
we?
come because the
Why
way
have we
French
regularly on
teams
this
operate,
program
the way
praised
French teams
Leinster?
operate is that if you put enough pressure on them, they buckle. If you try and go for points, you're running the risk. If they'd gone in at half time, 1 point ahead, they would have been getting the bollocking from their coaches, not the Irish guys. The Irish guys could have gone in filled up and full of confidence that they didn't play as well as France and are 1 point behind, instead of going in, trucking in and saying, Jesus, that was an opportunity that we blew. And we walked in where we threw away 3 points.
Well,
I
firstly, on this show, we've regularly praised both Leinster and Ireland for taking risks in championship moments by going for the line. Secondly, we've often complained about how risk-averse Irish teams had become in the last 18 months to 2 years. So a team that's taking a risk, but ultimately, the decision is neither good nor bad. The outcome is. And it's
if you go back to this time last year, we played New Zealand and we went for try to be risk-averse. And Johnny Sexton, if you remember, against the All Blacks, goes for 45-metre penalties up the line and doesn't make touch. You make your touch, you get your points. Rugby is still the same game that you and I and John played X number of years ago. When points are available, you take them. You take them. You don't some mystical kind of, oh, we must put points on the board and accumulate the maximum number of points. Bollocks. You have to go out and you get whatever is on offer and you eke away at that deficit.
the All Blacks.
I have to say, I pretty much agree with Jason. The decision was not the right decision. We were in front of the posts right before half time. Take your fucking points. Simple.
The outcome was not the right outcome. The decision is neither here nor there.
No,
That's rubbish.
it's the risk. Jason is right about the risk.
But the All Blacks are taking
risk.
points.
There's no risk in kicking from in front of the post. Sexton could probably kick with his heel backwards with his eyes closed and fucking make that kick.
Okay,
So-
well, and you're probably right. But if he'd missed the kick, would the decision have been a bad decision?
No, I don't believe so. It's not whether he missed the kick or they missed the
Yeah, it's
try.
all about the outcome. That's my point. The point
No.
isn't the decision. The point is the outcome.
No, I disagree. I think the point is that you
No,
go
but-
for
but just to take my point. If he decided to go for the kick,
Mhm.
right, which you're saying would be the right decision and would be the good decision, and he missed the kick.
But he didn't. He didn't even go for the kick.
If
So
he
how can
missed, if
So
he
you're
missed
talking
that
in
kick,
It's all about
Dave.
the outcome, Jason. It's not about the decision.
You're talking absolute nonsense and you're talking in
No,
riddles.
I'm trying to.
They made a mistake
your
not taking
outcome
the
bias.
points. End of story. Let's move on.
Would New Zealand have taken the points?
Yes, they bloody
No,
would.
they bloody
Because
well
they have
wouldn't.
to
And
win
you
the
know it,
game.
Jason.
They
You know they
absolutely
wouldn't.
would.
No, they
Of
would.
course they would.
Oh.
Of course they would.
Anyway,
Of course they would.
let's not
Okay.
get bogged down in that. But let's move on to a man who's got an awful lot of
Well, okay, let's move on to another player. We've persisted with Stockdale.
That's where I was going, Jason.
Okay, well, fire away, John. Fire away.
The guy has got an awful lot of hate during the week, and loath as I am to add to it, it was a fucking shambles of a performance from just in terms of his commitment. Like the time he takes to, fall on the fucking ball, get the ball, like at least show commitment, make the tackle. I mean, in both of the first two tries, he was culpable. And the first one just creased the guy and stopped him going under the post, for God's sake. He patted at him, like that's not international rugby. I'm sorry. And the guy had a lot in his armour going forward, but we didn't see a whole heap of that. We haven't seen a whole heap of that lately either. And for me, he's not a fullback. He's not positionally a fullback, and he's not reliable as the last tackler. He's, yes, it's nice to have him coming into the line but he can do all that shit on the wing. Leave him on the wing. I think he was moved to fullback maybe to accommodate James Lowe at 11 or something. I don't know what
Perhaps he was moved to fullback because Andy Farrell's a poor selector.
Well,
But that
whatever
could be a
reason.
possibility. I don't know whether you watched Against the Head on Monday night, lads. Did you?
No.
They did a little piece of analysis. I think it was Bernard Jackman did a piece of analysis.
I was watching the Leinster
And was that?
I was watching the Leinster game.
Yeah, well, you can record, so you can record this and then watch. Anyway, Jackman did this little bit of analysis where we kicked, and every single one of the players was on the left. If you drew a line up halfway between the pitch, every one of the Ireland players was on the left-hand side of the pitch. France saw this and ran their ball to our right, their left, and they scored in the corner. And it like, as they were saying, I couldn't agree more. When Schmidt was there, it became a dirty word that, there was structure and that we played to a formula. And there was just no formula. There was no structure. And they were very quick to kind of say, this is just poor coaching of the players, not knowing what to do in situations and just randomly kicking a ball and having no patterns of defense when it comes to just, hoofing the ball up the pitch and nobody covering the width of the pitch, people just covering one side of the pitch, following the ball and leaving massive gaps on the other side of the pitch, that France had the vision and were able to execute and score a lovely try in the corner.
I think we're realizing now how much we're going to miss Rob Kearney. If you remember back in the day, John Giles used to always say, you pick players in their... Pardon?
Or Joe Schmidt.
Or Joe Schmidt, perhaps. If you remember, John Giles used to always say, you pick players in their best positions. You don't pick them out of position. You don't try and fit a square peg into a round hole. And to a certain extent, that's what we've been doing since the World Cup with both Larmour and Stockdale. Neither of them are fullbacks, really. Now, ironically, there was actually a fullback on the pitch, but he wasn't playing at fullback. Now, I'm not going to make the argument that we would have won if Hugo Keenan had been playing fullback or Rob Kearney had been playing or whatever. But, having a fullback on the pitch would have ameliorated a lot of the damage. Because for a start, he wouldn't have... I don't think that particular try would have been scored if an actual fullback had been playing, a proper fullback. Now, I mean, in fairness to Stockdale, he's been played out of position. So he made mistakes, but he made mistakes in a position he shouldn't be playing in the first place.
Yeah, but Dave, not falling on a loose ball, not picking something up, that's not because he's out of position. That's because he's not committed or he's not, I don't know, his head is...
Are you suggesting, John, a winger would lack intestinal fortitude?
Look, that's stereotyping there, Jason, saying he's going to be doing his hair when he should be...
Well, no, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I don't think he should have been playing a fullback. I think it was a poor piece of selection. I think it mightn't be the only one, but it was certainly a poor piece of selection.
Do you remember when
he played poorly?
We played Ulster in the RDS, and I think it was, well, he had an absolutely shocking game because Leinster were attacking. It's great when teams are very good or players can look very good and and a lot of things can be compensated for when you're going forward, and particularly if you're getting quick, fast ball from a pack. But and if you remember back to that season in 18, like Ireland was winning. Ireland had a good pack. They were winning fast ball and they were giving him good ball. And they weren't called on to defend as frequently as they were in 19 and particularly 20. When we saw him in action in the RDS for Ulster against Leinster, kind of the tables were reversed. And it was the first time we'd seen him on a losing pack with, that was being dominated. And if you remember, I think it was Porter made a break up the side of the wing and absolutely creamed him. And okay, Porter's a huge bloke, but at the end of the day, he's a prop, and they are kind of easy enough to get down because they don't run that fast. They're strong men, of course. And he was just brushed aside, like and made to look like Mike Catt against Jonah Lomu back in the day. And like maybe and at the time I can remember people saying he's had to learn his he's only 20 or 21 and he's learned all his rugby as an international, but like he's 30 odd caps now. I mean, that's a lot of learning that you've already got under your belt. And like rugby is both sides of the ball. You got to be able to attack, especially if you're a winger, but you also have to be able to defend. And that's a massive shortcoming in his game.
When he was playing on the wing, we put up with his occasional, well, not occasional, but his defense. When he was playing on the wing and Ireland were playing well, you put up with his defensive weaknesses because of what he brought in attack. Now Ireland aren't playing well. That's exposing those weaknesses, and he's playing at fullback, which is placing them under an even stronger spotlight. The fullback's the goalkeeper of your team. If he makes one mistake, you're a goal down. If fullback makes one mistake, you're a try down. It's a position where all the stuff that Stockdale can do are the nice to haves, but they're not the necessaries. The necessaries are defensive, in the air, and kicking. Now he's a good kicker. I'll give him credit for that, but he's not as strong in the air as he could be, and he makes very poor defensive reads. And his reading in the backfield is actually poor as well, because I watched the game again just to have a look at that. His reading in the backfield is quite poor.
Absolutely.
I compared them actually mentally, because I watched the Ireland game on Monday, and then I watched the Leinster game, and I compared him to Jimmy O'Brien. Now Jimmy O'Brien isn't a fullback by trade, or at least I don't think he is. I think he's more of a wing come centre. It's too young in his career to say for certain. But Jimmy O'Brien's reading of the backfield was much better than Stockdale. Now, as Jason says, this is a guy with 30 odd caps. And okay, fair enough. He learned a lot of his rugby. He had to learn a lot of his rugby on the job. But you got to be able to read a backfield. If you're playing fullback, you've got to be able to read a backfield. And that's one area where teams have started to take advantage of us since the World Cup, since Rob Kearney retired. They kick to us a lot more because they can. When Rob Kearney was there, and before him, Gervin Dempsey, and before him, whoever, particularly those two, you couldn't kick to an Irish team. There was no point in kicking to an Irish or a Leinster team because the fullback was there. You were actually just giving the ball away. Now it's another way of attacking us, which means that we have to cover another defensive option, which weakens, our frontline defense.
Yeah, but like he played on the wing against England and Twickenham and was exposed for defensive errors as well in that game. One of them cost a try. So like it's not just saying, well, he's got more responsibility playing in full back. He actually did it on the wing too. And also, if you looked at the three of them, like your back three, your two wingers and your full back should be working in tandem together as a unit. That if one goes up, the other one covers the cross. And there was no communication or linking, or it was like as though it's sort of someone having an apprenticeship, but you're having an apprenticeship for a championship match in the Stade Francais. This isn't the time to be learning how to play fullback. You should be learning how to play fullback, playing for Ulster against bloody Dragons or Leinster even.
Worse than that, though, if we're planning on bringing in James Lowe, who I absolutely love as a player, but what's his weakest suit? It's possibly something similar, is positioning in his back, in his in defensive positioning. That kind of stuff is probably James Lowe's weakest suit as well. So if you've got the two of them in a back three, what do you, at international level, what are you going? James Lowe can give you so much going forward, and he's a fabulous committed guy. He can crease players for the fun. He can ruck. He can do all the. I mean, he's not a poor defender at all. It's more, I think, his reading of the game, or maybe his fitting into. Originally, it was his fitting into a Northern Hemisphere style of rugby that wasn't as open, perhaps, as what he was used to. But now he's had 3 years to do that. It's still. Maybe it's just because the other part of his game is so exciting.
I wouldn't be happy with either Lowe or Stock. Sorry, I wouldn't be happy with both Lowe and Stockdale in the same defence back three.
That's my point.
And I wouldn't be happy with either Lowe or Stockdale at fullback going forward.
Yep, same as that.
Zibo will be back next season, lads. So he'll be slotting in there. And I'm sorry, we're been quite.
Sorry, there is a dearth of experienced actual fullbacks in the country. We went from a position where we had quite a few to a position where we don't really have that many. I mean, you've got Hugo Keenan, who's kind of the incumbent at Leinster when everybody's back. I mean, you've got Mike Halley at I was going to say England, at Munster, Tiernan O'Halloran at Connacht, and then you've got kind of a rotating cast at Ulster. It's a position we're actually relatively weak in terms of, experience. Mike Halley looks like he might be a good player, but I've seen him play very poorly for Munster at fullback. I mean, yeah. I've seen him make some off of Ricks. I mean, I'd like to see how Matt Gallagher goes there, just on genetics alone. He must be better.
Or even Will Addison, or
Well, that's the thing. You see, Will Addison's out of the running at the moment, so it's a position of weakness for Ireland, and I think fullback's an important position because if you look at the spine of your team, it's one of the skilled positions. So if you've got a weakness there, you've got a weakness in the spine of your team.
For sure.
And lads, the other sloppiness that was shown in our team on Saturday was our line out. Like we won. I think it was when the ball was kicked over and Hugo Keenan went up to challenge for it, and it was batted into touch by Gael Fike. We got a penalty, but we had a line out then 5 meters from the line, and we were driven into touch. Now, I honestly can't remember seeing a professional team being driven into touch. We had to throw the ball at 2. I mean, that's rudimentary stuff. Like, you're gonna throw the ball at 2, you win the ball at 2. You don't get great attacking ball from it, but you win and you secure it. And we were driven into touch.
The team, that's just one symptom of a greater looking disorganization in the team. I agree completely. I mean, you secure your line out ball, you do something with it. Even if you don't go forward, you don't go backwards, and you certainly don't go into touch, as you say. We don't look organized. Now, how much of that is because there is a new coaching staff there, and there's been all this disruption, etc. So you don't know how much of it is that. And you kind of have to hold back a bit, ultra critical, until they've had a year under their belts, as it were, a year of rugby, as opposed to the interrupted thing that we have at the moment. But there is the two things that concern me most was how disorganized our pack looked in, if you like, the in-play set pieces, like the kickoffs, like line out mauls, things like that. And also how our defensive line, anytime it was put under any pressure, it broke. It didn't bend, it broke. And those are all organizational issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think we got 3 offloads in the game, 3. So we haven't, it's not like we kind of mentioned it earlier, Dave, when you said we were taking risks. We weren't really taking, we're taking a risk in context of going for that line out. But as a sort of an attacking team, we're taking no risks because we're not trying to offload. France had 14 offloads in that game. You know, we had 3.
Yeah.
You know, like, and between not being willing to offload, and then getting penalised when we did go to ground, we conceded 14 penalties to their 7, and most of them were at ruck time.
Yeah.
So we're taking ball. We're not trying to offload. We're taking the contact. We're going to ground, and we're getting penalised on the ground. So you know, like it's almost like a catch-22 situation. Like you just can't win from it.
The game has we've often said this before, but the game has reached another one of those kind of paradigm changing moments. The offload is back in fashion, because the situation at the ruck is just, you know, the breakdown is just too febrile. You can't count on getting your own ball back anymore. So the idea is you don't go into a breakdown. And how you do that? You do that by playing an offloading game. And we're not doing it at international level at the moment. It's easy to look good against Italy. We said that after the Italian game. And to a certain extent, we did look good against Italy. But it's another thing entirely doing it against the likes of England and the likes of France. And the game we played just wasn't, as you say, I mean, we were too content to play last year's rugby in this year's world.
And like we've played 5 games now under Farrell and Cat, and we've beaten the teams that we finished above, Italy, Scotland, and Wales. And like we saw, Italy offered nothing. They offered nothing against England. They kind of spoiled and, you know, made it difficult. But at the end of the day, really, like, honestly, I think I remember watching it on Saturday thinking, geez, the skill level is just appalling. And if you're an Italian supporter, you must just be pulling your hair out because, like, you know, anyone can play a certain type of rugby, you know, but if you can't do the basics of catch the ball, then you have no chance. And then we saw the other matches, sort of the first match, the Scottish. I mean, that was an appalling match.
Oh, it was horrible.
Oh my God! So like we finished above 3 rank average teams, and then the 2 that kind of had the wherewithal, with England obviously and France, the 2 that beat us are the 2 good teams. So we're, you know, like we're kind of nearly being a bit despondent because we're not, you know, we're better than the crap, but we're not as good as the cream.
Yeah, well, you know, it was there for the taking, as I said at the beginning, and if we had taken it, we'd be saying how great we were. Like there was even a point there where we were
John,
28-20, I think it was, and
but John, can I just say, just the scoreline does not show the truth in that match. Like we were 8 points behind. With 1 minute left to play, we were actually 15 points behind. And if you exclude that try, and then Robbie Henshaw somehow or other got the ball on the 22 and ran around like an under 13 and decided to run backwards and sideways and then sprint up the wing and wasn't touched. So like that was just a sort of a fluky, great bit of play, individual play by him, but kind of fluky. Like that wasn't creative. That was just him going on a run and a gap opening up. So we didn't really like, and then the other try that we got was Healy's try, you know, when we had a man in the bin and we still continued to go 1 out and take it around the corner and, you know, a forward try and bulldoze over from, you know, 2 or 3 yards out. When we have a man over, there was no, again, just going back to what Dave was saying, like, are you trying to go for it and showing some ambition? There was no ambition. We had an extra man all the time when Fike was in the bin, and we still refused to use it. We just went 1 out, 1 out, 1 out, and eventually Cian Healy, because he's such a huge bloke, managed to get over the line. But it's just no ambition.
We were playing last year's rugby this year. That was last year's rugby. Look, I agree with a lot of what you say. I agree with most of what you say. The only thing I would say is that, as I said before, this is a transitionary period for us. because there's new coach, new coaching staff, interruptions, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think he's going to get another second chance, if you know what I mean. Because revenue being what it is, I don't know if the union can afford to be, coughing up £2 million every 4 matches.
Well, the next one is a bit of a free hit out. In fairness, it's
yeah.
a nothing tournament. It's like, the venues for the finals have been set, before the thing is kicked off. So we're playing somebody for some place at home. Somewhere, well, that's at home. So we're playing the last match at home, and it's either to not come 8th, or to come 1st, or to come 3rd, or to come 5th. So like that's what we're going to be playing for. So this is a bit of let's just play a bit of rugby and try and get a few TV dollars in to save all the unions. And it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it doesn't even mean as much as Southern Hemisphere teams coming up to play us in the AIs. So, it's a free pass. So if he does want to do any experimenting or whatever the hell he wants to do, get all the shit rugby out there now, and try and find some kind of a plan for our bread and butter. And so the point you made earlier, Jason, about get rid of Sexton and get somebody in before we get close to the World Cup. No matter what we seem to do, we seem to fuck up every World Cup. So I'm really let's just take the Six Nations when we can, and not worry too much about going for the fucking 4-year plan, because there's more money in the Six Nations, for example. And ultimately, if you keep winning Six Nations, you'll probably develop a better team, and the World Cup will look after itself. So I'm not really of a mindset of let's throw in loads of kids and experiment, and in 4 years' time we'll have a brilliant team.
I would say, John, despite their occasional utterances, I actually think that's the official plan anyway.
Yeah, well, like bigger team.
Every other country does it though, lads. Every other country is bringing through. Every other country that is interested in trying to win the tournament, the World Cup, is trying to bring through youthful players. We do it at Leinster. We blow our own trumpet about how great Leinster are and what an amazing academy, and look at all this talent coming through. And like a lot of them aren't getting, not just Leinster players. Youth isn't being given its head. Like we like that bench. I mean, that's going back to fellas that were average when they were winning Pro 14 or Pro 12 titles.
And
how that was that?
And Grand Slams like Finlay Beelan.
Wow.
I mean, I
Sexton is a problem though.
I don't think any of those lads would have been on the bench if we didn't have a certain amount of injuries, but that's neither here nor there. You are right about them being of a certain standard.
But the point is, we know what they. The point is, we know what they can do.
Yeah.
Like,
but at the same time, are you going to put in Clarkson against French beasts?
Obviously not.
No. But you know what I would do, Dave? But you know what I would do? I give it has happened previously. Like, I don't know, 30 years ago, the Lions took a chance on Jeremy Guscott. Jeremy Guscott. He was never. 20 years ago, the Lions took a chance on Will Greenwood, right? These guys, neither of them were capped by their country, and they were brought on Lions tours, and one of them ended up starting in the tests. And Will Greenwood possibly might have, only he nearly died and swallowed his tongue. I don't know what player. Like, I mean, I could pick one out and say your man Dan Shanahan or Dan Sheehan. I don't know. Like, he's only played twice for Leinster, so probably have been a bit, OTT to try and to throw him into the international setup. I don't know.
I would suggest we've got games against Georgia and there's a Fiji coming up, and that you could start bleeding in those guys that you're suggesting, the likes of Sheehan, the likes of Matt Gallagher, the likes of Balakoon, or Quaylen Blade over in Connacht, those not necessarily younger, less experienced guys, and bring them up a level, and then start doing it. That's what the great thing about this competition is it's a free hit. But on the other hand, I think that the primary objective of the IRFU is not the World Cup, it's the next Six Nations. And that's why selections tend to be conservative at Six Nations time.
But there is a valid point to be had there about Johnny Sexton. Like, the guy is 35. He's obviously not going to make the World Cup. Maybe he is in his own head, but
John, you're going to say Carberry there?
yeah, well, I was just going to say, yeah, Sexton's a problem, especially if Carberry is not showing any signs of coming back from injury. Like, it's a big step down to who's next. We don't even know who's next. It's Ross Byrne currently. It was Jack Carty previously. We've got, don't know if they're ever going to rehabilitate Paddy Jackson, which brings me to another point of, that's something you were saying earlier, Jason. We should do a Paddy Jackson. Do what Ulster did to Paddy Jackson and just put him in there, got Ruan Pienaar to babysit him and do the kicking, and just get him up and running. So maybe we should pick a guy and do that, whether that be Harry Byrne, Ross Byrne, Jack Carty, Billy Burns. But see, this is the problem. Ian Madigan, you've got who's 31 now, and if you're going to rehabilitate Mr. Jackson, who's I think still in his 20s. Where you put your money is the problem. Like, without Joey Carberry and Sexton fading, you know, I don't know where you put. I'm not. I can't pick one out of all of them and say this guy is head and shoulders above all the others, because I don't really know who that person is.
But like, one lad that we did see on Monday evening was Harry Byrne. And again, like, you know, almost an impeccable performance. Okay.
He's cracking, but
Yeah,
is he the answer
he's
for
brilliant.
Ireland?
I think he is. I think he is the next cab on the rank.
Like, you know, just like that match, I mean, he made a beautiful, like, he's so self-assured for a young guy that is the third, maybe even fourth if Kieran Frawley is. I mean, I think he might be moved to centre now. I don't know, but you know, like, he's sort of vying for the third spot currently in the Leinster roster, and he's so self-assured. Like, you know, is it not just a case of saying, right, we're going to put our eggs in this guy's basket and go for it?
I think he's going to push his own basket forward. Indeed, I think he has everything his brother had. Like, Ross Byrne is a good player, but that's, you know, that's it.
He's already proved that he's Heineken Cup standard.
Yeah.
He's no problem. He's international standard, maybe not quite to the.
I think Harry Byrne has everything.
World Player of the Year standard. That's what we used to have. Like, a couple of years ago, Sexto was World Player of the Year, and that's the standard that we want. Like, even going back 15 years ago or whatever, 13 years ago, when Felipe was there. He was nominated for World Player of the Year. He came third in 07. So, you know, that's the Leinster standard of out halves that we want. You don't want somebody who's just functional that can.
I think that Ross. I agree with you entirely. I think that Ross Byrne. I think Harry Byrne has everything that Ross has, but he also has that little bit of that little X factor that sets the good Pro 12 / Heineken Cup player, that pushes that kind of player into the international arena, and I think he has that.
Well, maybe he does.
You were saying putting eggs into basket. I think that over the course of the next couple of months with Leinster, he'll push that basket forward himself to a position where he overtakes his brother, and where, you know, as you say, cruel eld hath palsied the limbs of Johnny Sexton, and I think that he will start pushing at that. He has that much ability. Then you look down at Munster now. The guy's only played 2 games, and already they're saying he should be going on a Lions tour or whatever. But Ben Healy looks like he does look like he has a bit of. He looked very good for the under-20s when he played in that team. So he looks like he might be the cab behind Harry Byrne on the rank.
But, like, we don't have to say we're only sticking to this guy and we're going to back him all. Like, what I was merely saying, instead of giving Johnny another 30 caps, like, we know what he's done. He's been brilliant. He's been great for Ireland and Leinster for the last, whatever, 12, 13, 14 years. It's time now we need to grasp the nettle and make the change instead of waiting 2 more seasons and then doing it when the guys are just starting to ramp up into, regardless of whether it's still going to be a World Cup in 3 seasons' time, regardless of whether you think that the IRFU want to win it or compete in it or not. It's still going to be the World Cup and we're still going to go to it. But instead of Johnny coming to the end and saying, oh, by the way, you've got the Six Nations, the Autumn Internationals, and then we're into the World Cup, lads. So one of you, like, give these guys the opportunity now.
I think
And let's see how they function at international level.
I think you've got 3 factors played into it. You mentioned most of them, Jason. First of all, is as you say, I mean, Irish rugby is at international level, short-termism. It's built into the system because all we care about is we go from January to January to January, as opposed to 2015 to 2019 to 2023. So we're going, we do have that. So the idea that we don't know a guy's too old until he's actually too old, if you know what I mean. I think maybe the other thing that comes into it is if Ross Byrne pushes on and develops at the rate he's developing, unless we start to give him starts at Leinster and unless he starts to get starts at Ireland, he's going to leave. Because
Harry or Ross?
Harry Byrne. If Harry Byrne keeps progressing the way he's progressing at the pace at which he's progressing, and he gets to the level we think he's going to get at, he's going to have to be starting for Leinster. Now, whether he earns it or whether he's given it is another matter. But he's going to have to start because at some point he's going to say, well, if I'm not starting, I'm 24, we'll say, and I'm not starting in the Heineken Cup or I'm not starting in Ireland, what's the point in hanging around? I can get a lot more money and not start for Ireland in England, as opposed to getting less money and not start for Ireland in Ireland.
Yeah, well, that's a factor. However, maybe the IRFU are looking for a volunteer to tell Johnny Sexton that.
Good luck with that.
But yeah, whether you anoint Harry Byrne ahead of his brother, whether you anoint him ahead of Ben Healy, whether you anoint him ahead of all the other guys we mentioned, that's, you know, the guy is going to get a shot. Like you say, David, push his own case. He is very self-assured. Maybe he's too self-assured. Maybe somebody will take the wind out of his sails.
Are you suggesting an out half might be arrogant?
God, no. Never. They're not the ones who pull all the strings and run the show. That's not an Irish rugby anyway. But yeah, we'll see. That's an interesting development, and I'm hearing no rumblings of Joey Carberry coming back anytime soon. So who knows if his ship has sailed or if he's just waiting long enough to get right and come back. So hopefully it's the latter.
Yeah. Well, anyway, looking back at our game against Glasgow, we obviously got our 4th bonus point so far this season. Got 4 tries. Benty back on the score sheet. You know, it's obviously pretty rough conditions, but we handled them very well. And like that game just seemed to be, I'd say there was a lot of bruised bodies on Tuesday morning when they woke up because they were flying into each other both sides.
It was a cracking game.
Yeah, it was a cut above anything else at the weekend in certain terms of Pro 14 rugby. It was certainly the best game of the weekend. The 2 teams played the best rugby of the weekend. It was a cracking game. That was a real game, and it was a really good win for a Leinster team that was, you know, relatively inexperienced. I was delighted with that. I was really, really happy with that. I was really happy with, as well as that, I was really happy with how all the individuals played. All the individuals played well, and the team played well. You know, and Glasgow added to the jollity as well by playing well as well. So, you know, that game was all win.
And what was your man's name? The loose head for Glasgow, and that he's an Islander, I think. I don't know what his name was, but whatever his name is, it was written on the inside of Michael Bent's pocket.
I was just going to say, you could look inside Michael Bent's pocket for his name.
I think that'll be his new name because Benty had him on toast in a serious way, which was great to see. People, I never tire of. He's the Devon Toner of 5 years ago. The way people used to lay into Devon Toner, just because he was a bit tall and looked a bit gangly or something. I don't know. Now they lay into Benty, who's never let Leinster down. is probably the best third choice prop in Europe, bar none. Maybe one of the Saracens ones at the height of their salary cap wrongdoings. But he's a cracking player, and a very unsung hero type of a guy. Just his personality as well. He's not particularly, and he's not a world beater. I'm not trying to build him up into something he's not, but he is a very solid, reliable, tight head prop who won't let you down and can also play loose head to a very high standard. So he's a great guy to have in your squad for those very nights over in Glasgow. And whatever he has over your man, the Indian sign he has over him, long may it last. It's great to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's an oft denigrated term. He's a solid journeyman. And it's a denigrated term, but it shouldn't be. It was journeymen who built the cathedrals,
Yeah.
Well, Glasgow had their opportunities as well. I mean, they had, I think I could remember 2 lineouts in particular that were in R22 that if they had have managed to hold on to those balls, they could have, challenged us, because obviously the ball was very greasy, and you kind of get a bit of momentum in the rain. You don't know what's going to happen in those mall situations. But they turned over the ball and we were able to clear our lines. Ruddock, I thought, was again fantastic. And a bit like Bent, maybe his sort of ship has sailed a little bit as regards getting Ireland caps, but he's still putting performances in for the dirt trackers, for want of a better word.
He certainly looked a cut above on Monday night. It was interesting you mentioned the lineup, because one guy I wanted to give praise to was James Tracy. The previous week, Dan Sheehan gone out and put in a great performance admittedly against Ebre, but it was still a great performance and had everyone talking. So it was good to see Tracy come out and say, hey, remember me? And he put in a super, and his darts were excellent as well, it has to be said, against Glasgow. I thought one guy who had a great game, who kind of always does, was Devin Toner.
Yeah.
He was an absolute menace on their ball.
He always is. He's just such an awkward guy to play against. And, there have been times, I always hark back to the away game against Exeter in Sandy Park, where we were defending our line just before half time and just after half time, I think. And he seemed to be everywhere. He seemed to, just creasing fellas on the line the whole time. He has that, he looks ungainly because he's just such a tall guy, but he's really powerful. He's really strong. He's super committed, and he really is an asset. And that's before you mention, he just has to do that and put his hand above his head, and he has the ball out of the line out. So he's got so many attributes that he can even scrummage on the tight head side. Which for a guy that tall is pretty serious. He's a fabulous player, and he's plenty to give. I think I'd stick him back in green like a shot. I know we've got James Ryan, we've got Henderson, we've got Baird coming through, but having him on the bench on Saturday might have, I'm not saying we're going to win the game, but it might have given us some good ball.
It might have shored up a shaky line out.
Yeah, he's a cracker. I was always mystified as to why he was written off for Klein in the World Cup. I think maybe even Joe Schmidt would admit that's a bit of a mistake at this stage. But yeah, we'll see. I can see him getting back in the team, or if it was me, I'd be putting him back certainly in the squad.
Yeah, it's good to see Don Levy get another 20-30 minutes.
Yeah. It's all about building up game time for him.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it might be too soon for him, but there's a guy who could come through in one of those internationals coming up, good to get him back. I mean, I'd say he might need a few more games under his belt for Leinster.
Fiji or Georgia.
Yeah. What'd you say?
Yeah,
Georgia, ideal opportunity to run some kilometers back into his legs.
We're playing Georgia. We're not going to be playing Fiji. We were originally scheduled to play Fiji, but they were moved to the other group when Japan cancelled, and we got Georgia. So yeah, it's not an either or. We're only playing Georgia, unless we come bottom of the group, and then we might be playing Fiji. Or Fiji do very well.
Miriam loves a good
One lad I was delighted to see get his first cap was Hawkshaw.
yeah.
I suppose he's from our old club, Dave
Yes.
Kilmine. So
He's from Carpenterstown.
yeah, so I was delighted to see him. He got a few minutes on the pitch, so hopefully that'll be the start of many caps for.
Well, he's had. I mean, a lot has been talked about how Dan Levy's had it hard over the last while, and he has. But Hawkshaw's had it equally hard. You know, been part of a Grand Slam team and then just ripped out of it, and then having to spend so long coming back. You know, for a fella that young, it shows good mental fortitude, shows a great attitude. You know that he's back playing for Leinster again. So fair play to him, and it was good to see him make his debut.
Yeah, just quickly going to run through some of the other results. Obviously, the Connacht Treviso match was called off because of the COVID. Munster had a fairly cushy number against the Dragons. Sorry, their game against Treviso is cancelled again this weekend.
I thought, just going back to what we were saying about Ireland, I thought Matt Gallagher looked good for Munster.
Yeah, he did. Very good. Very, very good. And, you know, I'm surprised that it's taken this long for him to come. Maybe he's been injured, but I just was surprised that he okay. But obviously, I think it was his first game for Munster since he signed. And obviously, you know, whatever, we're back now, maybe 10 weeks, are we? What else was there? Ulster had a good victory over Cardiff. Poor weekend for Welsh teams. All four of their provincial sides lost, along with their national side.
Yeah,
I watched Scarlets against Edinburgh. That was a cracking game of rugby. Finished 6-3 or 9-3 or 9-6, but it was just, I mean, and it was terrible conditions, and there was a lot of scrums, but it was I really enjoyed it. It was really enjoyable to watch because both teams were going for it. It's just the conditions weren't, you know, making it easy on them. But it was just a really good game of rugby to watch. I really enjoyed it. It was very, I don't know, there was something a bit old school about it that I really enjoyed.
So Dick's team finally got a win under their belt, chalked up a W. I think that's the first win, is it? Since they lost to Ian Madigan in the semi-final of last season.
Yeah, they've had the yips ever since then. So I'm sure they're delighted to get the win under their belt away from home, which is always nice.
Yeah. One sort of notable result was the Ospreys being beaten by Zebre.
Yeah,
it's good to see. Good to see Zebre get a victory, even though it was over John's new team.
Kiss of death I gave them last week.
I was just going to say that, John. You're so bloody Jonah, you know that. You've been cheering for Cardiff for the last couple of years, and as soon as you abandon them, they start winning. And now you've hopped on the Ospreys bandwagon, and they lose to Zebre.
I was never cheering for Cardiff. I thought they were going to have a good season about 3 years ago.
You were there in your pink rugby shirt, John. I saw you.
I've been slagged about it ever since, and that's fine. I'll take that slagging.
You're going to have divided loyalties this weekend, John. We obviously take them on Sunday.
Yeah, oh God, that'll be really hard to decide who I want to win that.
Because you remember a couple of years ago, this would be a game that would strike real fear in our hearts. Now it doesn't.
I remember going over to it where Dan Bigger took, I think it was about 4 years ago, Dan Bigger took a bang on the head and missed a kick to win the game at the end in Australia.
I remember that, yeah.
And it was, I was at that, and you know, I was very relieved to win that, and it was only because he got a bang in the head that he missed a kick. And that's how it used to be. It was a real celebration to win over in Australia. Now it's kind of, you know, yeah, whatever, bring it on. Are they going to be the ones to stop our 561-day Pro 12 or Pro 14 winning streak? 23
Pro 14 games unbeaten now.
Maybe they are. I don't know.
Last season, we I think it was actually today, or maybe the weekend. It was a year ago. We beat them in the RDS 53-5, and we also beat them over in the Knoll around one of the last games before lockdown. Yeah, we beat them 21-13. So they are a kind of a shadow of their former selves.
I'm sure under their new North Korean overlords they'll be a lot better than they were. I mean, there was talk at the beginning of the season that the Ospreys kind of found a bit of themselves again, and were kind of on the way back up. Haven't seen a whole lot of evidence for it, to be honest with you. And the league needs a strong Ospreys. It really does.
But they're third. They are third in our conference.
Yeah, but to quote Bill Hicks, after the first two, there's a real fucking drop off.
Yeah, that's true. We have scored 40 on average. We've scored 42 points in each of our games in the 4 games we've played.
Ospreys were great. Ospreys were the team that validated the regional system in Wales because they were the one true region, and they were good, and they were able to challenge the Irish teams as equals and more often than not as betters, certainly in the Magners League or Celtic League, whatever you want to call it. And since they've fallen off, the league has become a bit Hiberno-centric in terms of the dominant teams.
We need one of the Scottish teams to be, competing with us, or both of them probably, and we need a couple of the Welsh teams. Yeah. Otherwise, like us playing us, like if you think about it, like obviously Leinster have been the dominant team. We've played an Irish team in Munster, where they beat us obviously in a final. We've played Connacht, who've beaten us in the final, and we've played Ulster in a final twice. So like it's not like for the other clubs, they'll just get, it won't be of interest to them. So I suppose this leads me on to my next kind of topic, which was the South Africans committing to play in the Rugby Championship next season. And for you came across some tweet, Dave, I know, but like the original deal was for the next 10 years, but some source in South Africa saying it's just going to be for 3 or 4 years initially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be practical anyway for South Africa to play in the Six Nations this year because of COVID anyway. So they were going to have to do some kind of a deal with the Rugby Championship, and however long it was going to be until they could get out of it, if they wanted to get out of it, I don't know. But I mean, I know we spoke about this morning, and you kind of suggested that maybe I wasn't been, in terms of game time and player management, it wasn't an option. But I still don't see any reason why they can't play in both tournaments.
Yeah, I can't see that now, in fairness, but I suppose it's technically possible. They'd have to cut something somewhere. They'd have to not join the Heineken Cup.
Yeah.
They'd have to get rid of the Curry Cup. They'd have to, there's something they'd have to give. They couldn't play a 12-game rugby championship, a 6-game, presuming that there was now 7 teams in the 7 nations. And also,
I'm not sure that they're playing 12 games in the Rugby Championship. I think there's going to be 12 games in the Rugby Championship. I'm not sure they're playing all of them, John. Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
I thought that every team, I don't know. Maybe, I suppose they're not going to play 12 games for each team. Yeah, I haven't even thought about that. But I just saw the head in that article that said.
I mean, you could well be right. I'm basing that on nothing other than my own.
No, but I think
of it like yourself.
I think it's going to be. I think they're going to go on a tour, and they're going to play. So it's probably just going to be 6 games.
Maybe.
But you would wonder though if there was 6 games in that, and say 7 games in the European competition, like technically it's doable, I suppose, but it's still a lot of international rugby.
It's also a huge step up from what they're used to playing Super Rugby, which is a short competition, and it's a sprint as well. It's all in one go. I know that when they're looking at our competitions where we've got a bit of Pro 12 into the Heineken Cup, into internationals, into the thing, back into the Pro 12, into 6 Nations, like that frustrates the hell out of Southern Hemisphere supporters. They think it's crazy because their competitions are run off in one batch, and then they move to the next.
To watch them.
Fair, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that that's the way they seem to, structure their competitions to follow each other rather than stop start. So I like ours, actually, I have to say.
One thing that was noticeable in the statement was while there was a mention that future announcements would deal with the future of the club game, there was not the word super wasn't involved in that announcement anywhere.
No.
I think we're going to have a Trans-Tasman Super Rugby competition.
But there was talk of having a 5 teams from Australia, 5 teams from New Zealand, and 2 Pacific Islands, with a possibility of expanding that competition to include Japanese team at some point.
I don't
Initially-
think that South Africa
Initially
or
having that 12-team tournament. But like, I'm sure that the South African club sides are only dying to get into the Pro 14 or whatever it's going to be called, because it's going to open up the European market where money is.
Yeah.
Money isn't in South Africa. Sorry, money's in South Africa. The money's not in New Zealand or Australia.
No.
So like they bring something like 60-something% of the money into Super Rugby. So they can kind of call the shots of where they want to go. I mean, we saw that even with their the two weaker sides, the Kings and the the Cheetahs, like they were still getting a fairly substantial Super Sports deal,
Mhm.
the TV show. So like if you're bringing in the 4 strong provincial sides, you got to think that their TV company is going to bring in a few extra quid.
if you're a marketing executive in ABSA or Vodacom or whoever, your vision for the teams you sponsor isn't for them to be playing at stupid o'clock in the morning while everybody's in their pajamas eating their cornflakes, you know, and half stupid and kind of missing the game because they slept through or whatever. Your vision is some oak sitting in his house with the game on, with his tea on his knee at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening or whatever. That's what they want. They want prime time rugby. They want evening rugby. And the only place that they're going to get that outside of South Africa is in Europe. And that's the game, because, you know, at the moment, it has to be that money calls the shots because we need it.
Well, speaking of which, you see the IRFU got 18 million in government sports funding, which is
needed.
pretty nice, Philip. I mean,
yeah,
like, you know, people
Pretty
will
nice,
say
Philip.
GA got this and soccer got that, but at the end of the day, it's still 18 million quid that rugby needs, and it's going to go a long way towards you know, keeping people working, I suppose.
Yeah, it'll keep the wolves from the door for the time being anyway, until we can come up with some kind of solution to the situation we're in.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, no, I loath though I am to not complain about government, I'm delighted to not complain about government, because I think it's what we needed.
Yeah. I know John is an avid.
That wouldn't hurt. Sorry, carry on.
What's that?
I'm saying if they could do the same for the live music industry, that wouldn't hurt. Carry on.
Yeah. I know John's an avid Daily Mail reader, and there was an article during the week that the Gallagher Premiership is going to be expanded to 14 sides. Saris are going to go back up, and there's rumours that Epping Trailfinders can buy their way in for 50 million squids.
Ealing even, yeah, fair enough.
It would make the Premiership quite the laughing stock, all the same.
Yeah, but like, they've been wanting to do that for years. I mean, they were trying to maneuver people into a position where they had enough teams, where they had the right team in the Premiership and the right team being promoted. Then they were going to pull the drawbridge up, and that was you know, that's always been the plan.
So they're going to ring fence it. Are you saying they might ring fence it, John, and have no relegation?
Might. That's been their plan for as long as
they were just waiting for the right, as John says, the right profile of teams to be in the Premiership, and then that door would slam so fast you hear the sonic boom in Galway.
Yeah, I think that's been the plan all along. It's just manoeuvring it into the right position, and also getting the RFU to agree.
But did they not say that the relegation and promotion, which makes that league the best league? I'm confused here.
Yeah, but it depends which way the wind is blowing on that one, Jay. I think we find.
I know.
Maybe relegation and promotion. Maybe we're in the cycle where relegation and promotion make it easier for the Pro 12 because they don't have it, or the Pro 14. So, you know, rather than being the toughest league in the world and that's why we're so good, it's the toughest league in the world and that's why we're so bad. So maybe they're in that. Maybe they're in that type of, you know. So if they ring fence it, then they won't have to worry about relegation, and they'll be able to rotate their teams, and life will be just cool, and they'll be able to beat all the Leinsters and Munsters and any day they like, and it's going to be wonderful. So
perfect.
Sarcasm dripping, John, dripping.
Do we have any questions or comments?
No, because I
from
didn't tell
our-
anyone we were doing this. Because I
Oh,
was
okay.
up all last night watching the election.
God bless you. You're a braver man than me.
I had a what you call it? I had a webinar yesterday evening. I had another one this morning, and I'll tell you, it's a good thing that they were watch only because I was like a zombie.
Mhm. It's a good thing
Okay.
about those.
Yeah.
Don't have your camera on.
I hope whoever was giving the webinar isn't an avid Blues Talk watcher, or your game is going to be up for you, Dave.
Well, if you were an avid fan of Irish country rock, you might remember a band called El Diablo, and one of the lead singers was one of the guys doing the webinar this morning. So I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough.
I know.
On that note,
Boys, as ever, thanks a million. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook and Twitter, please give us a like and a subscription. Thanks again for watching. Cheers.